Greetings and thank you for tuning in. This is Kevin Cardinale coming to you live. Check out my live on YouTube. In recognition of the 1 year anniversary of the collapse of Leahman Brothers, I wanted to talk about where we were and where we are now. I think a lot of people are not aware, really aware of what is going on. They see the news and the media is not even. You have people like Young Turks on YouTube giving you just false information, just ridiculously bad information. So, if you watch all my videos, you know I research. I go to the source of the matter. Okay, so let's begin here. Leverage is a word. I want to define terms so that everybody knows what is really going, what I'm talking about. Leverage is a word heard frequently during the current financial crisis. It means borrowing heavily to maximize investment returns. The problem is that leverage was used to invest in mortgages that went bad. The new buzzword in the financial world is deleverage, of course. People use leverage because they have a problem. Caveman did it. A rock is too heavy, you go find a big stick, and you lever it up. A problem for Wall Street was it was getting harder and harder to make money buying and selling stocks for customers. There was online trading and other technology, and that made it tough. Because it's a very competitive industry, and a lot of the products that that they have been automated so that they can't make any more money, had to look for some time for new ways to make money, and the mortgage business was a good business. It was an especially good business if you used the leverage. With financial leverage, the stick is borrowing money, and you use it to lever up your profits. Here's how it works. Interest rates were low. The financial system was flush with money. So the investment banks would borrow money cheaply and invest it in mortgages. They made a good profit, and the more they borrowed, the more money they made, even though in retrospect it was kind of like using your Visa card to gamble with. Some of these firms were borrowing more than 30 times their assets. That means for every $1,000 that they made, they owed $30,000. That's a huge difference. That's a huge amount of leverage, and it means that they were on the hook for a ton of money. Now, home mortgages had historically been a very safe investment. But in order to generate more business, Wall Street was loosening its lending standards to ridiculous levels. They told mortgage brokers that they'd accept borrowers who couldn't even prove they had a job. As long as home prices went up, people who couldn't pay just refinanced. Now, these investment banks are full of really smart people. How could they have taken on such crazy amount of leverage to invest in loans that were bound to go bad? Well, Wall Street had rocket scientists creating securities. Nancy Kimmelman is a former Wall Street economist. She says it would be one of the investment banks were selling toxic. It would be one thing if they were selling toxic subprime loan-related securities just to other people, but they themselves invested in them. Part of that, she says, has to do with how complicated these securities are that these super smart people put together. The theory is that most people couldn't understand them, people that worked in the firms. I don't know that the management of these companies really understood the risk and the volatility. Once they did, the investment banks quickly tried to deleverage. That's a word that's being used a lot these days. What it basically means is that all these investment banks were trying to sell these dubious securities. But now, nobody wants them because they're tied to all of these problem loans. Nobody knows what they're worth. And a string of companies have collapsed because of it. So you have these securities that are so complicated that even financial savvy people in these investment banks, in these firms, did not understand what the securities were. I wrote an article on my blog. It's up there. where I quoted somebody as saying that it was like there was like some little Harvard business, cute, super genius kid who put together some of these securities with a credit default swap and tried to explain it to the CEO. The CEO could not understand it, didn't understand it. But and then the kid says, it's going to make you a ton of money. And he goes, oh, okay, go with it. Literally. Literally, it was just like that. Now, by the time Lehman Brothers is about to collapse, the mortgage crisis was already in the last stages of its death throes, right? Um, 2 years prior to that, people were trying to deleverage, and like I said, it would be one thing if they were selling to Joe Schmo, investment banker down the street, but they were selling to Germany, France, uh, foreign banks, foreign governments, foreign central banks, even the Saudi royal family had toxic assets that they have. So when this financial crisis came to light, I don't mean hit, but came to light. When you're watching the news and you're watching MSNBC and CNBC, by the time you hear about it, it's already 2, 3 years old. So all these bailouts for companies that happened in 2008, and they were talking about the stock market going to crash and blah blah blah. You have to do something. That the financial crisis had already hit 4 years ago. By the time you see it on CNBC, it's already been matured to in its death throes for 4 years. Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008. Do you really think Lehman Brothers was good, and then poof, whoa, collapse in 1 quarter? No, that was a 4 year process. Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, that was years in the making. Years in the making. When you get to the point where you are defaulting on your loans, years in the making. Everybody wants to say, "Oh, Obama, what have you." For who was in power? 4 years. 2002, 2004, 2006. All of this was already happening under who? Bush. So all of you ants running around talking about Democratic, Republican, you're all idiots. That's right, I said it. You're idiots. If you don't even know what the financial crisis is or when it started, and you're blaming some brand new president, not that I'm even defending Obama, you just don't even know what you're talking about. For people like what is it, Young Turks, to even come out and say, oh, blah, blah, you don't even know what you're talking about. 4 years already it had been done. 2 years before Lehman Brothers went under, companies had already been going out of business. Companies were over leveraged. I heard one report where it was 40 to 1. And the SEC had removed, and the Federal Reserve had removed the 10% backed security. So they had zero in the bank. Some of these places, zero. These bailouts were unnecessary. These companies were already done. They were already done. Most of the bailouts actually went to save foreign companies. Do you hear that in the news? Do you hear that on CNBC? No, you don't. So the anniversary of Lehman Brothers, we haven't learned anything. Why haven't we required deleveraging the assets of all these companies? That should have been the first thing done. Captain Cardinale out.